The morning started with silence until Rex began barking. Not his normal bark. This was deeper. Urgent. Like he knew something was wrong before I did. I stepped out onto the patio barefoot, half awake, and immediately noticed the gate was wide open. Broken latch. Paw prints all over the concrete, soaked with muddy water. Something or someone had been here. Rex stood firm at the pool's edge, tail low, ears alert, eyes locked on the fence line. That pool had seen more than cannonballs and floaties. It had trained over 30 K9s for active duty, explosives, search and rescue, narcotics, even PTSD support. To anyone else, it was just a backyard. To us, it was sacred ground. Then she appeared. Clipboard in one hand, camera phone in the other, Rhonda from the HOA marched through the gate like she owned the property. No knock. No warning. "You're in violation," she barked, waving her phone at the pool. "This isn't up to safety code. You're harboring dangerous animals. This is a liability to the entire neighborhood." I didn't say a word. Just watched her snap photo after photo of Rex, of the dog's kennels, of the fence, the water, even the dog tags lined up inside the shed. Behind her, Rex growled low. He could sense it too. That she wasn't here to talk. She was here to destroy. She paused when her lens caught something she didn't understand. A police badge mounted inside a glass case on the wall near the pool pump. Next to it, a certificate. DHS letterhead. She blinked but said nothing. Then turned and walked out, slamming the broken gate behind her. I knew it was coming. That night, the power cut out around 2 a.m. The motion lights didn't trigger. The back gate somehow was open again. I checked the kennels. Axel, the Belgian Malinois I just brought home from the force last month, was gone. No tracks. No barking. Just the sound of sprinklers kicking on down the street and a cold silence that sat heavy on my chest. Morning came. With it, an envelope taped to my front door. A formal HOA violation. Multiple citations. Unauthorized animals. Improper fencing. Noise complaints. Threat of escalating fines. Required removal of all training equipment. 72 hours to drain the pool. They called it a water hazard. They had no idea what kind of hazard they were creating. I called the station. Off duty. No response. I checked with the neighbors. None had cameras facing my yard. Rex sat at the gate all morning, not moving, just staring toward the street. I checked the tracker on Axel's collar. Nothing. Either removed or disabled. My hands clenched. My pulse climbed. Inside the shed, I stared at the photos on the wall. Dogs I'd trained. Dogs that had saved lives. Axel had pulled 2 kids from a fire last year. One more deployment, and he would have retired. Now he was just gone. I stepped outside, lit by the afternoon sun, and stared down at that pool. They saw it as a violation. I saw ghosts of missions. Dogs leaping off the edge. Trainees giving commands in rain and heat. Flags folded in honor. This wasn't just a pool. This was the one place left where the work still mattered. And someone was trying to take it away. The next morning, Rex barked again. Louder this time. He led me to the end of the street. There, tied to a stop sign, bleeding from his leg, barely able to stand, was Axel. Next to him, a note. One word, scrawled in red ink. Remove. I carried Axel home in silence. His body trembled against my chest, breath shallow, eyes dim but alive. I wrapped him in the old police K9 towel we always kept by the kennel. The blood had soaked through it before we even reached the porch. Rex stayed by his side the whole time, pacing like a soldier guarding a wounded brother. He didn't bark, didn't whimper, just watched. Inside, I did what I could. Cleaned a gash, checked for broken bones, fed him water drop by drop. Axel didn't cry. K9s don't do that. But I saw it in his face, the confusion, the fear. He'd trusted someone. Someone had betrayed him. That's when I knew this wasn't random. This wasn't some kid pulling a prank. This was targeted. The HOA violation notice still sat on my kitchen table, right beside the torn envelope. I picked it up again. They were trying to shut everything down. No court hearing. No inspection. Just power. A list of bogus claims on paper, weaponized like bullets, unauthorized kennel structures, improper fencing height, excessive water usage, animal noise during prohibited hours. And the final line, pool must be drained or filled within 72 hours or be subject to fines and legal action. I called the number listed on the violation. No one picked up. I left a message. You put my dog in danger. You crossed a line you can't walk back from. No reply. Not that day. Not the next. But on the third morning, I heard the footsteps. 3 sets. Heavy boots. Voices just low enough to sound official. I looked out the window. 2 city inspectors stood at the edge of my driveway. Behind them, Rhonda, arms folded, sunglasses on, smirked like she'd already won. They didn't knock, just started taking measurements. The fence, the pool, the distance between the kennels and the main residence. One of them pulled out a drone and launched it into the air. I stepped out onto the lawn. They froze when they saw me. You want measurements? Let me save you the trip. I handed them a binder, thick, tabbed, in plastic sleeves. Every permit, every inspection passed, DHS certification letters, county kennel licenses, pool safety approvals signed by the very city they were pretending to represent. Rhonda tried to interject. He's operating a military facility in a residential area. It's a violation of zoning and community safety. One of the inspectors flipped a page, his brow furrowed. Then another page, and another. This isn't a military facility, I said. It's a rehabilitation and training center for retired K9s, for those deemed too dangerous to adopt. I give them a purpose again. The drone hovered above us, buzzing like a mosquito. Rex barked once, and it jerked in the air, spinning left, crashing into the edge of the roof. The younger inspector looked shaken. The other kept reading. Rhonda tried again. He's weaponizing dogs. I've had neighbors complain they hear them practicing attacks. He's preparing them for. Enough, the older inspector said, closing the binder. Everything checks out. Rhonda's mouth dropped open. The inspectors turned to leave. She stepped in front of them. You're just going to let him get away with this? After what he did to that dog? They both paused. One turned back toward me. What happened to the injured dog? Found him tied to a signpost 3 blocks away. Sedated, bleeding, and somehow his GPS tracker was disabled. You think I did that? I didn't answer. Just stared at her. They left without another word. But she didn't go home. She walked straight across the street into her house. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. An official email from the HOA board. Effective immediately, your property is under formal review. All operations must cease until further notice. That night, I saw her lights go out, and mine turn on. A black SUV pulled into my driveway. Government plates. Someone stepped out holding a briefcase. He didn't say his name, just handed me a sealed letter, nodded, and left. Inside, a single page. Operational security review initiated. Cooperation required. Mission timeline unaffected. I looked down at Rex. It had started. The following morning, my street was lined with parked cars, news vans, city trucks, a police cruiser. I stood on a porch, watching as Rhonda guided a small crowd toward my property like a tour guide leading guests to a scandal. She had notes, printed photos, and a stack of complaints. A city zoning officer followed behind her, confused but compliant, clipboard in hand. Behind them, a local reporter adjusted her mic, already rehearsing her lines. This wasn't an inspection. It was a spectacle. Rex barked once from the yard. Not out of fear, out of instinct. He could sense the tension crawling up the walls. The crowd approached, cameras rolling. Rhonda shouted toward my front door without knocking. We have legal right to inspect this facility. You are operating outside of residential use codes and community has concerns about safety. I stepped out with the binder again. This time, I had copies. I handed the zoning officer the permits. The reporter tried to intercept me, asking if I was harboring attack dogs and running illegal military drills in my backyard. I didn't answer. The zoning officer looked down at the paperwork, then up at the pool. Then back to Rhonda. Everything looks valid. This address is registered with the county as a dual-use training facility under Special Provision 42B. You're federally licensed for K9 service animals and cleared by DHS for water-based conditioning. Rhonda's eyes twitched. But he has unregistered animals, she snapped. They're dangerous. They bark at children. One of them escaped. He trains them to attack. That's not what we do here, I said, voice low, cutting through the noise. We train rescues. We condition federal service animals. This pool has helped prepare over 24 dogs for duty with fire departments, disaster teams, and federal agencies. You're not qualified, she hissed. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my badge. Worn, scratched, but real. 20 years in tactical K9 operations. I've worked hostage rescue, FEMA response, and served as a field liaison in 3 international disaster zones. You think this is about barking? The reporter lowered her mic. The crowd went quiet. Rhonda's face flushed. She tried to recover, pointing toward the shed where training gear was stacked. That's military-grade equipment. That's standard deployment-grade harnesses, donated by retired handlers. They're not weapons. They're tools for survival. The zoning officer handed me back the documents and walked away. But Rhonda didn't leave. She stood frozen on my lawn, watching the news van begin to pack up. Her audience was slipping through her fingers. Then she made another call. By the end of the day, I received a formal notice from the Zoning Review Board. A cease and desist order. Effective immediately. Civil penalties. Potential criminal liability for unlicensed use of federal training dogs within a residential district. A full review hearing scheduled. All operations to halt. I held the letter in my hand. They weren't playing fair anymore. I locked the gate, posted the legal documents on it. That evening, I walked the perimeter. Rex by my side. My shadow felt heavier than usual. And then I noticed it, 3 holes cut into the side of my privacy fence. Clean. Sawed. One of them large enough to fit a small camera. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the order, but because of the silence. Axel still hadn't recovered. He barely lifted his head. I stayed in the living room with him, hand on his paw, staring at the wall. Just before dawn, an alert pinged on my phone. A security cam I'd set up in the alley caught movement. A man, hoodie, gloves, approaching Rhonda's cousin's garage. I recognized the figure instantly. It was Rex, but he wasn't chasing anyone. He was trying to lead me. I threw on my boots and followed. What I found stopped me cold. In the garage, barely lit, was a cage. Inside that cage, Rex sat silent. Next to him, an empty syringe and 2 dog collars. One was Axel's. The other was a collar I hadn't seen in over 4 years. It belonged to Delta, my first K9 partner. The one who died during a raid in Arizona. Only no one ever found his body. Until now. I stood in that garage, heart pounding, lungs frozen. Delta's collar was faded, but unmistakable. Scratches from the plate he'd torn through on that final mission. The chipped edge where I'd tried engraving his call number after the funeral. But it couldn't be. I buried him. We held the service. Folded the flag. Rex didn't bark. Just looked at me with a gaze that wasn't fear. It was warning. I took a step closer, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This wasn't just a garage. It was a holding cell. Scratched floorboards. 2 tranquilizer darts on the workbench. A laptop still running, open to surveillance feeds. Not from Rhonda's home. From mine. My yard. My kennels. My pool. Someone had been watching us for weeks. I picked up the second collar. The name tag was burned off, but the make and serial code matched the old DHS batch from my first tour. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had access to decommissioned gear. I looked at Rex again. You let me here for a reason. Footsteps outside. Fast. I dropped the collar and yanked the door shut just as someone tried pulling it open from the other side. The lock clicked. I backed away, heart pounding, mind racing. Then a voice. Low. Controlled. You shouldn't be here. I didn't recognize it. But the tone was familiar. Someone used a command. Military. The lock twisted. I bolted out the side entrance, Rex close behind. We didn't stop until we hit the tree line behind my property. My phone buzzed again. Anonymous message. One line. You're not just being watched. You're being tested. I got home to find the back gate wide open again. Inside, Axel was gone. But this time, no blood. No leash. Just a folded note on the floor. Turn off the lights, or we do it for you. I checked the kennels. Empty. All 6 dogs gone. The pool deck had muddy prints leading from the shed to the far fence. Tire tracks in the alley. Whoever did this had a plan. An access. Rhonda's smug face flashed in my head, but this was bigger than her. This wasn't HOA. This was extraction. I called the field commander I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. His voice cracked when he heard mine. You weren't supposed to get pulled back in, he said. I didn't get pulled. They came for me. He paused. You think this is about dogs? It's not. He sighed. You trained a unit. A real one. You built something they couldn't control. Now they want it dismantled, quietly. But they took Axel. They'll return him. Broken. Or not at all. I hung up. I wasn't going to wait for a body bag. That night, I posted everything. Footage, documents, photos of the collars, a full breakdown of who these dogs were, what they'd saved, who they'd rescued, the real purpose of that pool, of my mission. Within an hour, the video had 20,000 views. By dawn, local officers were at my door. Not to arrest me, but to help. One of them was a rookie I'd trained last year during a water rescue drill. He handed me a flash drive. Found this behind Rhonda's shed, buried in the planter. Motion cam feed. I plugged it in. The footage showed masked figures moving dogs into crates. Rhonda's voice in the background. She's too loud, too sure of herself. She didn't orchestrate this. She was just the bait. The next clip shook me to my core. It showed Axel inside a facility. Cement walls. Fluorescent lights. Shadows of men with gloves and needles. Axel was strapped to a gurney. And someone off camera whispered, let's see what this hero can really do. That's when I heard the scream. Not a dog's. A human one. Then static. Rex growled beside me. They were testing them. Weaponizing them. Turning rescues into weapons. They picked the wrong pool. By sunrise, I was already at the edge of the city. Rex rode in the back of the truck, pacing in circles, his instincts fired up. We didn't need words. He knew where we were going. He felt it like I did. Axel was alive, but time was running out. The flash drive had given us a clue. A reflection in one of the steel walls revealed a number. 27, a unit designation from an old holding facility, one decommissioned 5 years ago after an animal testing scandal. Off the books. Deep inland. No GPS tagging. Only those who knew its coordinates could ever find it. I used to train dogs for raids on facilities like that. Now I was breaking into one. We drove for 3 hours in silence. Not a single song. Not a single word. Just the sound of wheels eating up the road. Every few minutes, Rex would let out a low rumble, like he was remembering something ugly. I reached the outskirts, a narrow dirt road leading into the hills, with broken fencing and old federal warning signs, half torn by weather. Faded paint red, and no entry without clearance. I parked at the edge, grabbed the old duffel I hadn't touched in years. Inside, tactical leash, 2 sets of gloves, flashlight, a sealed envelope labeled burn after use. I strapped it all on. The air around the place was too quiet. I approached from the back, no movement. But inside, muffled echoes. Barking. A high-pitched buzz. Then a whimper. Axel. My boots hit gravel as I crept to a broken side door. The hinges had been tampered with recently. A rush job. Someone wanted in and out fast. The interior was a maze of concrete tunnels, flickering lights, and cages lining the walls. Inside the first one, an old German shepherd. Eyes cloudy. Skin scarred. Not mine. I kept moving. In the second cell, 2 of my dogs. Blitz and Echo. Drugged, but alive. Rex rushed to the bars, nudging at them. They stirred. No keys in sight. But I had bolt cutters. One snap, and the door clanged open. Echo stumbled forward, licking Rex's face before collapsing beside him. Blitz followed, tail tucked but alert. We moved deeper. Security cams turned in slow circles above, but I'd already jammed the signal with a silent blocker, old tech from my final mission overseas. Then I heard the voice. Low, smug, close. He's not just a dog. He's a blueprint. I crept toward the source, an observation room behind one-way glass. There he was, Axel, tied to a vertical gurney. Head low, heart monitor beeping steadily. Across from him stood a man I knew all too well. Mason Cray, ex-DHS behaviorist, expelled after trying to condition trauma response K9s to serve in urban suppression units. I thought he vanished. Turns out he was just waiting. He turned suddenly. You always were predictable, he said to the glass. And loyal. That's what makes you so easy to break. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the butt of the flashlight into the door panel. Glass shattered. Rex lunged through, teeth bared. Mason screamed. I got to Axel first. Cut the straps. His body slumped into mine, weak but breathing. He recognized me. Tail thumped once against my boot. Mason backed toward the emergency exit, hand reaching for something in his jacket. You don't get to walk out of here. He smirked. I already have. Then I saw it. A remote detonator. I tackled him. Rex followed. The button never got pressed. I left him handcuffed to the rail, his own dogs, twisted, half-trained victims, snarling behind their glass. I carried Axel out. All the dogs followed, limping, dazed, but alive. Outside, the first light of dawn broke through the fog. And standing at the end of the path, 3 black SUVs. Federal agents. One of them stepped out. The same man who handed me the sealed envelope days before. He took one look at Axel, nodded, and said, "The mission's not over. But it's yours now." Then he handed me a new folder. Inside, certification reinstated, full operational license, and a final order. Rebuild, retain command, and train them to protect what we almost lost. I looked down at Axel. He didn't need to speak. He was already home. The wind hit different on the drive back home. Axel rested with his head in my lap, his breathing shallow but steady. Blitz and Echo curled up in the back beside Rex, the truck swaying slightly with their weight. No one barked. No one moved. It was the silence of survivors, every heartbeat a reminder that not all battles are loud. The gate to my property was broken when I returned. Splintered wood, a boot print on the steel lock. Rhonda's signature wasn't on it, but her stench was all over this. I stepped out of the truck and scanned the house. Someone had gone through it. Cabinets open. Photo frames face down. Paperwork scattered. But they hadn't taken anything. They were looking for something. Or planting it. I found it under the couch cushion, a small black drive. Same model I'd seen in Mason's lab. I plugged it in, alone in the dark. It held one file. A single video clip. A camera hidden in my yard 2 nights ago. It showed Axel being taken. But the one leading the operation wasn't a masked mercenary. It was Rhonda. She stood behind the fence, speaking into a radio, giving directions. Not just watching, commanding. And behind her, 2 of the city council members from our last HOA meeting. This wasn't just about dogs. This was power. All money, land use, property. If my pool got shut down, the city would reclaim the land for redevelopment. Turn it into a commercial complex. A silent deal already approved behind closed doors. My work was just collateral damage. They had tried to bury it under noise, legal jargon, complaints, and lies. But they left one thing standing. The truth. I made a decision right then. No more silence. No more waiting. I uploaded the video unedited to every platform. Tagged the agencies. Local news. State reps. The caption read, "This isn't about dogs. It's about corruption." Within hours, my front lawn was flooded, not with officers, but supporters. Veterans. Dog handlers. Rescue teams. Even a group of high school students who'd watched our public demo just months earlier. One of them brought a poster, "Let them train." Let them live. The media arrived. Drones flew overhead. People held up pictures of the dogs we trained, dogs that pulled kids from floods, found missing hikers, protected officers. I didn't speak. I let them speak for us. Then a black SUV pulled up again. Same federal agent as before. This time, he stepped out with a man in uniform, a state attorney. "We've opened a formal investigation into your HOA," he said calmly. "The zoning orders have been suspended. All training operations are cleared to resume." And then the words that cracked something inside me. "We're reinstating your facility as a federal K9 auxiliary site, permanent designation." Cheers erupted. Rex barked once, loud and proud. But I wasn't done. I looked at the crowd, the reporters, the agents, and I stepped forward. Rhonda and her allies thought they could break something they didn't understand. But they forgot what happens when you push people who train heroes. We don't fight back with noise. We fight with purpose. And this pool, this facility, it's not just water and fences. It's legacy. Every splash in that pool is a heartbeat. Every bark is a vow. These animals don't just obey. They save. And every time one of them walks through fire to bring someone home, it starts right here. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to still. And in that moment, I felt it. Not victory, honor. The kind you can't buy or steal or seize. The kind you earn one rescue at a time. The morning after the storm felt like something sacred. Sunlight streamed over the pool like a spotlight, cutting through the mist rising off the water. The air still held the scent of wet cement and fresh dirt, reminders of what had nearly been lost. But we were still standing. And the dogs were back where they belonged. Axel, though still recovering, paced the edge of the pool like a commander inspecting his troops. Blitz splashed in on command. Echo waited patiently for the whistle. Rex, always the enforcer, barked twice before diving in to retrieve the decoy. The system wasn't just operational again, it was alive. And this time, the world was watching. We'd received over 4 million views overnight. My inbox was flooded. First responders requesting training, volunteers offering help, veterans asking to come visit. Donations poured in. One message stood out. From a woman in Arizona. "My son was pulled from a river by one of your dogs last year. I never got to thank you. Now I know who to thank." I read it twice. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was all of ours. Rhonda had vanished. Her house, once guarded by HOA patrols, now sat quiet. Windows boarded, mailbox taped shut. Rumors circled. Indictments pending. A formal investigation tied her to embezzlement and falsified permits. She wasn't just trying to shut down a pool. She was trying to cash out on betrayal. But karma moves quicker than concrete plans. And when it strikes, it doesn't just knock, it levels. The city council voted unanimously to dissolve the current HOA leadership. New elections were scheduled. Candidates emerged, actual residents, teachers, paramedics. A single father whose daughter had been saved by Axel in a fire 2 years ago. We were building something new, something real. I returned to the pool that evening. The lights glowed soft blue beneath the surface. Each ripple reflected the faces of dogs who gave everything and asked for nothing. I held Axel's collar in my hand. Not the tactical one, the original. The one he wore when we first started this journey. Scratched, worn, but never broken. Just like him. I knelt beside him and clipped it back on. "This is yours," I whispered. He looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much but still trusted anyway. "We're not going anywhere," I said. "And neither is this place." Behind me, footsteps approached. The federal agent stood there, same black jacket, this time with no badge in hand. Just a man. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, handing me a letter. A commendation. National recognition for service through K9 rescue. My name printed beside Axel's. I didn't feel pride. I felt peace. He paused before walking away. "Just remember," he said, "they weren't after your dogs. They were after your heart. Because it's the only thing they couldn't buy. And you didn't give it up." I watched him leave. The dogs settled in for the night, circling near the fire pit, ears twitching at every owl in the trees. They were back in sync. Back in command. No chains. No commands needed. Only purpose. And for the first time in years, I walked into the house without checking the locks. Because when you train guardians, the world becomes a little safer, even in silence. So if you've made it this far, remember this. Sometimes the fight comes to your doorstep, dressed in laws, wrapped in fake smiles, hidden behind clipboards and fake fines. But you fight anyway. Because some things aren't just worth protecting. They protect us back. Like, share, subscribe, and never forget. What they tried to seize became the very thing that set us free.